Good morning, everyone. I'm Tim Murphy, Chair of the Toronto Community Housing Board of Directors. Welcome to our board meeting, which we are, as we have throughout the pandemic, holding through WebEx and live streaming on YouTube on one of the highest subscribed channels there is. Okay, maybe not. I do want to, of course, start with our land acknowledgement and acknowledge that the land we're on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And we also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I want to start actually with a little comment on the news that I'm sure everyone is aware, which is Swansea Mews. And I think our CEO and our Chief General Counsel Durham are going to be talking about it. But we, on behalf of the board, wanted to acknowledge this very difficult and challenging event and our prayers and best wishes for a speedy recovery to the one tenant, and of course, working very hard to ensure the safety of all of our tenants in Swansea Mews, and you will hear more about that. And we know it's a difficult and disruptive process for everyone, and we are working as hard as possible as an organization to help ensure the safety of our tenants and their families. We are offering a range of supports to help them temporarily vacate from Swansea Mews as quickly as possible for their safety, and then to ensure relocation to a stable, suitable home elsewhere in the portfolio, and of course ensuring as appropriate a right to return once and when the repairs and or more permanent repairs and improvement is completed, so that we can ensure a return to the community. On behalf of the board, I want to thank the tenants in Swansea Mews for their patience and cooperation during this difficult time. A number of our board members attended a June 14th tenant town hall and heard directly from those tenants the justifiable frustration Swansea Mews tenants are feeling. And I can assure you that TCHC staff have been working very hard to respond to this situation. And I want to express my appreciation to those staff who are working throughout the day and at night under great stress to make sure that our tenants are dealt with as quickly and as safely as possible, with as much sensitivity to the needs of those tenants as we can bring to bear. I do want to talk too about seniors housing transition. This is our first board meeting since the June 1st. On that date, Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation assumed responsibility for operating 83 seniors designated buildings as landlord to 15,000 seniors tenants. Employees of our former housing unit transferred to the new corporation on that date, and agreements took effect. Governing the transition and how THC will provide services to Toronto Housing on an interim basis. We're also have an agreement to address how tenants under seniors have continuing access to OACH. On behalf of the board, I want to thank the staff across both organizations for the cooperative manner in which we were able to generate those agreements, and continuing and to tenants in both organizations to their efforts to have as seamless a transition as possible. We got public session today. We've got a range of items. We've got a report from our committee chairs, an update from Barbara Shulman on equity, diversity, inclusion strategy, an update from Edi on transition of all contract managed buildings to direct management, and a number of items for approval to be considered by the board: a quarterly capital budget update, a proposal to transfer a portion of 1080 Eastern to the City of Toronto to add it to the Housing Now site. COVID-19 continues to be an issue. After more than 800 days, Toronto Community Housing has ended its emergency response. It was based on its management plan and consultation with Toronto Public Health. We are well aware, as I'm sure many are, that COVID-19 has not gone away, but we are prioritizing infection prevention and control model for dealing with it. Continue, of course, to follow all public health advice and take measures as appropriate, of course, to protect our employees, tenants, and workplaces for this and other public health threats. I want to, of course, thank our employees for their outstanding work during the emergency that's lasted more than 26 months, and thank you for keeping the essential services going, supporting our tenants, and keeping them safe. So that concludes my opening remarks. We have moved to our deputation process and voting in the virtual world. I think we've identified, Dara, we got some deputations today.
Yes, we've heard from 5 people who would like to make deputations on, 7 deputations on 5 items. And we'll flag those as we come across them in the agenda.
Okay. Review the public items as listed on the agenda, which are identified there. I guess need to do a conflict of interest yet? Any before I guess we get to the approval of the agenda? Any conflicts? None noted. On the consent agenda, do we have any matters anyone wants to hold? No, I think, Dara, we're moving to our new procedures here.
Sorry, yes, and I think Mr. Campbell was speaking, but was on mute.
I'm just saying we don't have a consent agenda, actually.
So our practice would be to canvass all board members as to whether there's any matter on the public agenda that they would like to hold. We will hold automatically items 7, 8A, 8D, 9A, and 10A because we have deputations. We've had individuals indicate they want to depute on those matters, and as well, we've a presentation that is ready for the board in relation to item 9A, which is the EDI strategy. If there are if board members can indicate what other matters, if any, they would want to hold for discussion, we'll hold the Swansea Muse update as a matter because we're going to take the board through a brief discussion about that. And then other items not held can be adopted.
Yeah, I guess to be fair, John, that my language may have been a bit unclear. So we're trying to make our agenda a bit more efficient so that we're going to, have presentations and held items will be ones, and then otherwise we'll kind of do an omnibus motion to try and speed up the process. So we've got that list that Dara identified. If there's anything else? Yep, John.
Mr. Chair, I would like to add an item to the agenda if it's possible, and that is an update on the renting or the leasing of the bachelor suites, bachelor apartments.
Okay, well, we'll add that to other business if and when we get to it.
All right.
Thanks. Okay, so we have a list. So do we have a motion then to, Adele?
I just have a quick question on 9B.
So why don't we just hold that? Any others? Okay, motion to approve other than that or receive, Adele. Seconded, John. All in favor? Excellent. All right. Where are we going to next now, Dara?
Given the matters held, we'll go first to item 6, which is the Swansea Muse update.
And do we have any deputations on that?
We do not.
Okay. So over to you, Jag and/or Dara, as appropriate.
Thank you, Chair Murphy. And certainly, once again, we do have the report before you. And I do need to drop off at 10 a.m. just for my son's graduation. So if it does go any longer than that, then certainly Daryl will step in. But we've outlined for the board the incident. Of course, it's a horrific incident at Swansea. We're working very hard to ensure that we're supporting the tenants as much as possible. Beyond what's before you, unless you would like me to walk through the document specifically, certainly would be happy to take any specific questions. But what I can assure you is we are leading with our tenants first, and we're doing everything we can to ensure that we get them to safety and remove them from the safety concern. In parallel, we have temporary accommodations arranged for that. In parallel, we have a relocation process in place in order to try and get our tenants into safe, stable accommodations as quickly as possible. And we continue to work with the city in order to ensure that we are compliant with any orders. And once again, I'm happy to take any questions that the board may have.
So I think do we have a sense of when we'll be able to get everyone to out of the Swansea Mews?
Our goal is, of course, immediately. We have 25 families remaining in the community at this time, and we're working every day in order to assist them in order to relocate to those temporary accommodations. Where what I can't give you is specific timing. What I can tell you, of course, is we do have the order, and certainly we are working with the city to ensure that we take every step possible in order to help our tenants be removed from the safety concern.
Yeah. Any other director have comments or questions? I can say for the public session, we also discussed this at length in our confidential session to review fundamentally the focus on safety to make sure that we were doing all that we could to ensure the safety of our tenants, and pleased to say that our the TCHC staff are focused on that same criteria. Any other director questions or comments?
I think you said it well, Tim, that the board is very pleased with the approach that JAG and the team has taken in terms of putting tenants first and paying attention and supporting the family that was injured in this incident.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, do we need a motion to receive the report? Councilman Ziada Mohammed, second. All in favor? Receive, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item on the agenda is item 7A, and we have two deputants in relation to that item. The first deputant is Jacqueline Yu. I believe that Ms. Yu is on the line. Ms. Yu, can you hear us?
Yes. Hello.
Hello, Ms. Yu. You have 5 minutes, and you can proceed when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and all the committee members. My name is Jacqueline Yu. Thank you for the opportunity to share my experience on the Tenant Service Committee Charter. If my time is up, please let me know. TCHC set out a broken vision of how TCHC will continue to engage with tenants. The reality is that this framework is faulty from the start, and the TCH process appeared to be quite weak. For example, there's no representation from 11 Solomon apartment building matters. Only 11 Solomon apartment building tenants should be representing of 11 Solomon apartment building matters, and not the townhouse tenant at the separate building. TCHC has serious governing issue. When error in record keeping are brought to the TCHC attention, nothing to my knowledge is done to correct the error, and the error was used in TCHC decision-making process. There appeared to be no verification of information, even when the error was brought to the attention of Tenant Solution, COO office, and all the way to the CEO office. Instead of verification information, the same error was incorporated into decision making. In my experience, the tenant representative on record at TCHC is not the actual tenant representative. The error has been brought all the way up to the CEO office attention, and the result is that the same error continue and are perpetuated throughout the organization. Policy feedback and decision making should be obtained from affecting tenants, reducing the impact of non-affected group in decision making. It is very important for TC policy communication to consider establish a permanent, independent, open operation real tenant engagement group to replace the current non-real tenant engagement refresh. Our new model of real tenant engaged group must open, welcome all interested tenants to participate, and not only a few selected secret tenants. For transparency, our independent new model of real tenant engagement should be led by former and current tenant board directors and chaired by Director Fletcher, supported by General Counsel Barra and his current deputation team members. Directly report back to CEO board as independent vision to ensure our new model of real tenant engaged refresh free of corruption and fair to all tenants. Our current tenant engaged refresh is non-real. All feedback does not reflect reality. Secondly, there was no minimum number of tenants required to vote for this committee rep and not open call election. Current tenant engagement and use false and misleading information, including people who do not live at our building or our project, but put it in TCHC official record. And tenant engagement using different set of non-real committee reps and non-real committee members to suit the different corruption situation and not provide information. Who is the fellow tenant nominate that non-real committee rep? Non-transparency of tenant fund. In 2018, I'm the tenant representing my building at 11 Solomon to the tenant fund table at 341 Wall Street West. I got one fan and one bench approval for our laundry room. The fan was delivery, and I signed off the fan and gave it to the superintendent, Oscar, to keep in his office for our building's needy tenant to use. The approved bench worth $800 in our laundry room, never delivery to our building as of today. After I keep chasing to CSC Amila, I'm being targeted. Thank you for listening and consideration for our new model of tenant engagement refresh for open deputation format. Instead, replace the current one. Thank you very much for consideration and listening. I welcome any question to verify my claim.
Thank you. Any directors have any comments or questions for the deputant? Thank you very much for your deputation. I appreciate it. Dara, do we have another one on this one?
Yes, we do. Catherine Wilkinson has asked to depute in relation to this matter. Ms. Wilkinson, are you on the line? Ms. Wilkinson? Do we have Ms. Wilkinson on the line?
Doesn't sound like it.
It does not. So perhaps I can speak to item 7 while we try and get Ms. Wilkinson available for the purpose of her deputation. This is a report to the board related to our Tenant Services Committee BIFAC building, which is our Building Investment Finance and Audit Committee, and our PAC, our Procurement Audit Committee, or sorry, Procurement Approval Awards Committee charters. These charters govern the work that is done at the committee level of the board. The charters have been reviewed by the governance committee. The BIFAC charter has been reviewed by the BIFAC committee, and as has the PAC charter. I don't believe there are any significant modifications to the charters that are before the board this morning for its consideration and approval. There is a proposal to amend the Tenant Services Committee charter in order to provide that the Tenant Service Committee would have responsibility for overseeing and ensuring the design, implementation, and reporting of Toronto Community Housing Corporation programs governing the distribution of tenant funds, including the participatory budget program, and reporting and making recommendations to the board on these matters. That was a recommendation that was made at the Tenant Service Committee when it considered its charter. And we are bringing that recommendation forward to the board today for its consideration.
Okay. Thanks, Dara. Any director questions, comments? Does the bottom half of Brian have any questions or comments? Sorry, just kidding. Oh, we can only see from the nose up, Brian. There we go. Okay. I guess the deputant hasn't appeared, Dara.
So we lost contact. Sorry, Ms. Wilkinson, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay.
So Ms. Wilkinson, if you would like to make your deputation in relation to this matter, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning. On the annual review of the committee charters, I want to just clarify that tenant engagement funds of any kind were never reviewed through BIFAC, previously at Toronto Community Housing. For those of you who know me, if this was the case, I would have challenged this years ago and made a motion to have it redirected to the Tenant Services Committee. As such, no approval is necessarily needed from BIFAC to allow the Tenant Services Committee to provide oversight of funds for tenant engagement activities, because it has always been the Tenant Services Committee responsibility. So I am pleased to see that access to tenant funds is now embedded in the TSC charter. However, I would like to make a slight suggestion for an amendment in the motion before you, and that is simply to remove a couple of words which are including the PB program. And why this matters, the motion at the Tenant Services Committee did not identify programs by name, and I think we all know that the PB program name is subject to change, and additional new funding programs may be created in the future. The other piece on the Tenant Services Committee charter is with regards to the Commissioner of the Housing Equity. And at the Tenant Services Committee, I suggested there may be a need to revise this portion of the charter as well to reflect the changes in the Commissioner's role with regards to now reporting to the newly created Tenant Seniors Housing Corporation in addition to this board. And as indicated by Dara, you know, they've had some conversations with the Commissioner in light of the role she's been asked to assume in relationship to the Tenant Services Housing Committee as to whether or not that would give rise to changes in her terms of reference, and it would be brought forward to the board. And additionally, the volume of file refers to OACH has increased significantly. In 2014, when OACH was created, it was responsible for senior tenant files only. And then 6 months later, OACH would be responsible for vulnerable tenant arrears files. As of January 1 of this year, the board approved expansion of the OACH mandate to include pre-eviction audit of all tenant files in arrears prior to proceeding to the Landlord and Tenant Board. Clearly, these changes will have some sort of impact on service delivery. And as this is a contract position, I'm not sure, how long Oates would be managing the increased volume and reporting to both of these boards. The last item I wanted to talk about under the charters, although not indicated up for review, is the Community Safety Advisory Committee Charter. Tenants are not aware of this newly created subcommittee of the Tenant Services Committee. The charter was approved for the Safety Advisory Committee October 2021. And although the Community Safety Advisory Committee is listed under the Tenant Services Committee website page, it is listed with membership only. So what I am hopeful that Toronto Community Housing is considering the creation of a new tab or a link on the TCHC website to readily access the Community Safety Advisory Committee that includes their mandate and their charter as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions for the applicant from the board? Okay, thank you for your deputation. Appreciate your thoughtful contribution. Thank you. Dara, any?
So I'm in relation to the specific items that Ms. Wilkinson's identified, in relation to the reference in the Tenant Service Committee Charter to the participatory budget program. I'm in the board's hands. I understand the concern, but the program as it is presently envisaged is the participatory budget program. In the event that the title of the program was to change, the charter would need to be amended to reflect that new change. Yeah. In relation to the role of the OACH, the Office of the Commissioner of Housing Equity, the role of TCHC in relation to the service that the Commissioner of Housing Equity and her office will provide to the Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation is limited to providing administrative support for that function. It would, in my submission, be unwise for the board to build in a role for itself in connection with the relationship between the commissioner and the board of the Seniors Housing Corporation. In the same way that the commissioner reports directly to the board and has a relationship with this board, it should manage that relationship with the Seniors Housing Corporation independent of community housing. And then finally, in relation to, I can advise in relation to the Community Safety Advisory Committee that we will be bringing a report to the next Tenant Services Committee with a recommendation with respect to the charter for that committee, and that will then be brought forward to this board at a subsequent meeting for its consideration.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you need a
motion to approve the charters.
All three charters. Can I get a mover, John? Seconder, Debbie? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next item.
Item 8A, we have two deputations in relation to that matter, which is the price impacts of on general repair programs due to COVID and other factors. The first deputant is Veronica Hearing. Ms. Hearing, are you?
Thank you.
Ms. Hearing, you have 5 minutes if you want to begin.
Okay, I want to state that I find when we get repairs done in our building, we're having an issue with the contractor themselves. I have asked for them to do some repairs in my unit, and when they came in to do the repairs in my unit, they kept ripping up the stuff, and they were rude. They were very, very using a lot of bad language, and I kept telling. And when I talked to the super, explained to him the situation, he still insists on sending these same two guys, and I kept telling him, "Don't send me them, or I'm going to turn them away." Well, he sent them again to do a vanity, and I told him no, because you guys did a really lousy job the last time, and I don't want you back here again. Well, this morning there was another knock at the door, and it was the same contractor, and he wanted to put in baseboards in my unit. And I explained to him that it has to be coordinated with the pest control guy and you. I explained this to the superintendent last Friday. I explained to him the pest control guy wants them to take the baseboards off, put the pesticide in the walls, and you put the baseboards on top. And you have to coordinate it with these two contractors. And these guys came, and I told them the superintendent has to have to coordinate with the pest control guy. So now the boss of this Joe Pace and Sons that comes around here, called the superintendent's boss and complained that I was turning down service. I'm not turning down service. I want it done right and only once, because they keep coming and redoing the same thing, and it doesn't solve the problem. It comes back and back and back. I mentioned to 5 supervisors, 4 out here and 1 came from downtown, and the one from downtown said that to redo the vanity. Now, I'm trying to get across to the super, don't bring these same 2 guys. But his boss keeps bullying him, and he keeps giving in. And I'm standing there saying, look, I'm not letting them in. They're so rude. But the reality is they keep sending them. We need better contractors, and we need rid of these guys because they just don't do the job right. They're costing Toronto Housing a fortune in redos. And when they do redo it, it's never done right. So I'd like to see something done about this particular group of contractors, and we need more than one in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? Thank you for your deputation. Dara, do we have one more, did you say?
Yes, we do. We have a deputant. The name I've got for the deputant is Rita. Is Rita on the line?
Hello.
Hello, Rita.
Yes.
You've got 5 minutes for your deputation. You can begin when you're ready.
Okay. I just wanted to address 8A because I think it pertains to my building, and in regards to this deputation, I'm a little bit frustrated because I had a problem with Joe Pace and Sons where they came in. There was a leak in the ceiling, and they had to fix it, which they did, and they redid the bathroom. I have environmental sensitivities, so the paint that I use, it has to be paint that does not smell. So what happened is that after they left, I went in to look at the bathroom, and the bathroom was white, and I had painted it because I paint once a year, and they had changed the whole color to a yellowish color. And because of that, it was very strong. And I had the superintendent come upstairs and take a look at it. And the supervisor that was, doing this, he came up the next day and wanted to look at it, and I would not let him in. And he was from Joe Pace and Sons. I asked the superintendent, what is his name? Superintendent told me he did not know his name, and I told the superintendent, I find it strange that you have contractors coming into the building and you don't even know their first names. So basically he had Bruno from Joe Pace and Son call, and when I spoke to Bruno about it, he said we can send someone to put it back white, and he told me his name. So when they came and they did, then I waited a couple of days, and then I painted over it because the paint was very strong, and I was very upset that they changed the color of the paint without my consultation. And they said to me, well, this is the paint we got from 30 years ago. This is how all the apartments are. And I said, no, it's not. It's not. And not all the apartments are this color. I mean, no one has paint from 30 years ago. Plus, it's very toxic. I could feel my chest tightening. I could, I have the runny nose. I have my eyes, and it's just. I said it was very uncomfortable for me. Anyways, move forward. There's another issue. This past weekend, I had someone that was supposed to be coming in to change the vanity because of 8 years of waiting, mold and everything. I have the pictures. And he came in, and I guess he's not a morning person. He wanted to come at 7:30. And when he came in, he wanted to leave the front door open, and I said, you can't prop it open and leave it open because the smells that's coming in from the foods and people are smoking in their unit, it's going to come into the unit and it's going to affect me. So I will leave the door open, and if you need for me to hold it, that's fine, but the door kind of closes and opens, so you don't need to hold it open. Anyways, I asked him also to wear a mask. He told me there was no COVID. He was not going to wear a mask, and eventually he said yes to it. I gave him booties to wear. He eventually wore the booties, but when he came in, he was very upset, and there was something in the bathroom. I thought it was a rotting because I couldn't tell from the vanity. So when he dismantled the whole vanity and he moved it, he was out in the hallway putting it away and putting it outside, and I was able to go in and take a picture because I wanted to show the superintendent because I didn't know if it was mold or if it was rotting. I have since come to find out it was mold. However, he found me in the bathroom and said, you know, I said to him what I was doing, and he said, ma'am, I'm taking time off, you know, for my son's baseball game, and he was very upset at me for being in the bathroom, and at that point I said, well, then leave. So he basically left. My water was turned off, didn't know my water was turned off until I went to clean the bathroom. I have pictures of him throwing debris down the toilet bowl and had to call the call center in a panic because I said I can't flush the toilet. The water is off. They were able to send the custodian upstairs. Thank God there was someone in the building, and he was able to, you know, turn the water back on. So I am communicating with this supervisor, Joe, who called me yesterday, but he is not returning my calls, and I have been trying to call him. His phone number is not working, and it's very frustrating. So again, Joe Pace and Sons, you have to make sure they send people that's qualified. Then they come in, they have street clothes, they have no tag. If you ask their name, they get upset. It's very uncomfortable. You know, they don't want to wear the mask, they don't want to wear the booties. They're very, very crusty, and if you say anything, then basically what they say is that you're refusing service. And it's not fair. It's not fair to the tenants, and this has been an ongoing issue. So I really hope that something is done about this because it's not fair to the tenants. Some of them may not be able to communicate because English is not a first language. They may not have internet. They may not be able to send an email. They may not be able to call up, and it's not fair to the tenants. So if this is done, then it benefits all the tenants in the building.
Okay,
Thank you.
Maybe we get someone in TCHC to follow up on any specific issues she raised, if that's okay. Thanks, Nadia. Okay. Any other questions or comments from directors? Okay, thank you. Item 8, anything to speak to on 8 and 8A? Okay, need a motion to receive, I think.
Tim, just 1 minute. I don't mind moving it, but probably a question for Adele. 30% seems high to me. Am I the only one in terms of the increase? I understand inflationary costs and all of that, but
30% is high, but there was a lot of due diligence that was done to determine that this was the appropriate amount. They've discussed it with the city. I think there's, I don't know if Alan can speak to it but we asked the exact same questions, Debbie, and there's been a lot of work to determine that this is a required increase. So Alan, could I?
So Richard Grosch is in the meeting.
Oh, Richard's there. Okay. Oh, I see him. Sorry, Richard.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Through the chair, yes, it does seem quite high. We did do extensive market research, both with contractors as well as the supply chain itself. We've also validated that the City of Toronto is also experiencing cost increases in the range of 30% on their contracts as well. So it's been validated. Frustrating, but validated.
thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, a motion to, I guess, receive, Darren?
It's a motion to approve, and it approves the increase for a period from July 1 to December 31, and it gives rise to increases to the budget for the programs governing this work that we're also asking for the board to approve.
Okay, a motion to approve. Adele, seconded by Anna. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So next one.
The next item is item 8D. We have a deputation in relation to that matter. The deputant is Ms. Wilkinson. Ms. Wilkinson, can you hear us?
I can.
Yeah, you have 5 minutes and you can begin when you're ready.
Okay, so thank you very much. It's really good to hear some new deputations from tenants that haven't come forward before, so that's terrific. And I also just wanted to make a point to Mr. Campbell with respect to adding new items to the agenda. I am really in favor of having that conversation about bachelor units, and it's been had in previous years. The only issue is when you raise it verbally as an add-on item at the agenda, it does not allow stakeholders to dispute on it, but have at it because I have complete faith in you. So with regards to the kitchen sanitary green treatment and cleaning program, I am in support of staff in pursuing this preventative maintenance solution to kitchen green treatment and cleaning. Given the advanced age of our buildings, undertaking this work is important not just to existing tenants, but to future tenants as well. Drain blockages are not necessarily caused directly by a tenant, though some of them are. And given the majority of tenants do not have household insurance, it falls to Toronto Community Housing to cover any of those repair costs. Flooding between units is a serious issue that severely impacts tenants, not just in the source units, but in surrounding units as well. I have experienced 5 floods in my 4-story, 65-year-old building during my tenancy, none of which were caused by me. During a flood, water does not conveniently run straight down. It seeps into multiple units through ceilings and walls, light fixtures, damages flooring, and creates water spores in units which severely impact tenant health. When multiple units are affected by a flooding incident, whether it's in the kitchen, the bathroom, due to a burst water pipe or radiators, the cost to undertake repairs is significant, and this is disruptive to tenants because it takes time to bring their unit back into a state of good repair, as the unit has to be dry enough to actually do the necessary work. The return on investment in reducing the risk and frequency of floods for our tenants, this is significant. In the long run, taking a proactive approach will save Toronto Community Housing significant general contractor remediation costs and potential insurance claims. So I have 3 asks. While this program is geared towards 187 high-rise buildings, 7 stories or more, perhaps there is consideration for a preventative maintenance program for low-rise buildings in the future. With regards to tenant communication, in addition to giving a 24-hour notice of entry, consider putting posters for this work in advance where this work will be done in specific buildings. Focusing on the positive impact this will have on tenants, tell them the type of work that will be performed and what, if any, personal items may need to be moved in advance in order for the work to take place. And if chemicals are being used, educate the tenants about the products ahead of time and if there is any risk to their family or pet's health. Lastly, consider tracking and reporting flooding incidents by cause and by cost to help identify needs for preventative maintenance programs in the future. Thank you for your consideration.
Great, thank you. Any directors' questions for from the directors? Any questions or comments? No, thank you for thoughtful deputation as always. 8D, motion for approval.
Sorry,
Sorry, Adele.
I thought we were going to amend this item to include a review after the.
Oh, 2 years, correct.
Yeah. And I think it does speak to the deputant's concerns and questions.
Yeah, so we're gonna review the program after 2 years through BIFAC to report back to the board.
So I've amended the motion and just that reflects the recommendations in the report to add a paragraph 2 direct management to report back to the board in 2024 through BIFAC in relation to the implementation of the program and its impact. Is that sufficient? Is that?
And I understand from Alan that that there is flexibility in canceling this program if it's not deemed suitable.
And I believe Alan was referencing the contract language that we incorporate as a standard in our contracts that allow us to terminate contracts for convenience. So yes.
So I'm happy to move it as amended.
Okay, thank you. Any other, so a seconder? Debbie, all in favor as amended? Approved, thank you.
So the next item on the agenda about which we have deputations is item 9A. This is the TCHC Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Survey results and strategy. And I believe Ms. Birch has asked to depute in relation to this matter. Ms. Birch, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. You have 5 minutes and you can proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning. First of all, I just want to make this as short and sweet as I can. This is called the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Strategy. And I think we need to be very clear about the fact that this impacts on human rights. And how this strategy goes about is going to affect our human rights policy. So I'd like to make sure that it's transparent to tenants and staff and everybody that this is about human rights, and I'd like that to be identified in the name of the strategy, because otherwise people may not know that it's going to impact that policy. So I'd like that to be amended in a way to reflect that this is about human rights. My second point is that as I look through this report, I noticed that there has been surveys with staff and that there's, phases 1, 2, and 3. And I find it interesting and upsetting that the tenants are in phase 3. We are the last checkbox on this, and that's the optics it has for tenants. For a corporation that says, oh no, we put tenants first and this is all about tenants. But yet you've already talked to your staff, and so you've roughly got, I'm going to say roughly 1,300 staff total in Toronto community housing, but you've got tens of thousands of tenants that this is going to impact. But yet your staff survey was done first. That doesn't seem very logical to me, and tenants should not be a checkbox at the end of the day. Because there's more of us, and without us, let's face it, none of you guys have jobs. So I think it needs to be a better practice in Toronto community housing that I'm not saying staff shouldn't be included. They absolutely should be. They're human beings that have rights as employees, as human beings, and everything else. But if you're going to tell us that no, we put tenants first, then do it. Talk the talk and walk the walk. And that's basically all I need to tell you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments for Ms. Birch? Great, thank you for your deputation, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Deputation, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Are we having a presentation on this one, Darren?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Ms. Schulman, our interim vice president of human resources, and Jackie Kramer from her team are in the meeting, and along with Kelly Schultes to make a presentation to the board in relation to this matter.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair Murphy and board directors. I'll just take a couple minutes before I turn it over to Jamie. So as Dara mentioned, today we are joined by Kelly Schultes, who is our Director of Talent Management, and Jamie Kramer, our Senior Consultant, Diversity and Inclusion. And over the last year, we have been working on developing and implementing a comprehensive equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy, which has been a top priority for the HR division since I arrived. Through the past 12 months, we've engaged in some key foundational work, including stakeholder consultation, engaging with our employee resource groups, doing best practices research, establishing our own advisory group and steering committee so that we have voices providing input from across the organization. And we also prepared to undertake a very comprehensive diversity engagement survey of our workforce. Today, Jamie Kramer is going to present to you a summary of the results that we received from this survey that was undertaken in the end of 2021 and the early part of 2022. And subsequently, the development of the strategy that we have now put together and begun to implement some actions, as we intend to rely on this strategy and framework to guide us in the organization as we truly strive to move the dial in becoming a more inclusive organization. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie for the presentation, and then we'll be happy to take any questions after that.
Thank you, Barbara, and hello to our chair and the board. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see the presentation today. So, as Barbara mentioned, I will be talking about our equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy, providing you with an introduction and overview to that, talking about our consultation process, which does include our survey results, then going into more details about the EDI strategy, starting with measuring and evaluation, what our goals are, our phases, and then next steps before opening up to any questions that you may have. The Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Strategy for Toronto Community Housing reflects actions and initiatives for all dimensions of diversity and is based upon the results from our D&I survey as well as best practices in our internal consultations. It's a corporate-wide effort for us to be more understanding and address the needs of everyone through our detailed review and measurable plan to further enhance the efforts that have already been taking place. But I do want to really emphasize that this is a living document and it can and will be adjusted and adapted to the current and future needs, not just of our staff, but of our tenants as we expand the consultation process in phase 3. In keeping with our values of respect, accountability, community collaboration, and integrity, we're going to be implementing our EDI strategy in accordance with the principles of anti-oppression, anti-racism, belonging, dignity, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and psychological safety. In terms of that consultation process, we had 3 distinct areas in which we looked at different items. First was the literature review, where we reviewed a variety of current and updated versions of EDI strategies from other organizations that were similar to ours, both social housing and also public sector. But we also looked at the EDI strategies from organizations that are demonstrating best practices on a global scale, whether they were for-profit or non-for-profit. We also worked with our internal diversity committees, both our diversity advisory group and our diversity steering committee, as well as our employee networks, to receive feedback on what we learned from our diversity survey results, as well as what our intentions were for the EDI strategy. And as Barbara mentioned, we ran a diversity survey from November 25th, 2022 to January 31st, 2020, and we had a 50% response rate with over 1,000 submissions. And this entire process informed our EDI strategy goals, actions, and phases. And I'll talk about the diversity survey in just a moment. So as I noted, we had that 50% response rate, but our key takeaways were to make EDI a priority, especially from our executive leadership team and our management team. And we wanted to have more work done internally to understand what we're doing, what the perception of our employees were, and how that really impacts not just our employees, but our tenants as we build out these initiatives under that umbrella of EDI. And there's definitely a need to make sure that anything we do under EDI includes everyone's unique diversity dimensions. For the survey, we had 5 distinct categories of questions that we asked on a Likert scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And you can see the broad overview of results here. On the right-hand side, in that blue color, is the favorable or positive responses. In the middle, or that gray section, is the neutral, and on the left-hand side, or in the orange, is the unfavorable or negative. In the perceptions of inclusion and experiences, we only had yes or no questions, so you'll see that there's no gray bar there, but those are really guiding our understanding of harassment and discrimination and belonging in the workplace. The bulk of our questions were tied to that topic of diversity engagement, or that last row at the bottom there, and you can see that there's that biggest divide in terms of responses there. In the next slide, I'm going to show a few select options that we gave so that you can see where some of those differences in inclusion are and how we're starting to prioritize our actions for our EDI strategy. So these select questions here are for the organization overall, but we can also see them for different divisions, for different dimensions of diversity, and really get a sense of where some of those differences lay between our employees and our staff members. But what's really key to note is where we have that very large neutral or gray bar and the larger unfavorable or orange bar, because those are how we're prioritizing the actions that we're taking. When we have 20% or higher in the gray bar or 10% or higher in that orange bar, we're really making that a priority. So some of those include, if I raised a concern about discrimination, I'm confident TCHC would do what is right. And I receive recognition and praise for my good work, similar to others who do good work at TCHC. So as noted, there's an importance of looking at that 20% or higher in the neutral area and 10% or higher in the unfavorable or negative area. And we have listed some of them here, and I showed you some of them in the other slide. But not only can I see them for the organization overall, I can see them for each division. So as I'm working with our ELT members to make sure that we're prioritizing what needs to happen within their division, I can point to these specific data points to say this is where the biggest areas of improvement need to occur. So just to break it down.
Sorry, can I just interrupt
Yes,
you quickly? What
absolutely.
do we have? It's Tim here. Do we have comparators about how we fit on these issues against similar organizations or somewhat similar organizations?
I can look for them more specifically, but not everybody publishes the results of their survey in that sense, other than other public sectors that might have done it. And it really depends on what questions they asked in relation to what questions we asked. But when I was looking at what people's action items or goals were when I was doing that literature review, I would say that they must have asked very similar questions, because what I got out of the results in terms of patterns and trends seemed to align with the actions that were taken by other organizations as well. So there was a lot of focus around those internal metrics of professional development, the ideas about harassment and discrimination, and the ideas of trust, which you'll see are some of those really big key points that came out, not just in these questions, but in our comments as well. And that's how we decided to prioritize from those. But in terms of benchmarking against other organizations, our intention with this is to benchmark against ourselves, because we have a very unique situation in how we deal with different tenants, how we deal with our internal groups, and even the makeup and demographics of our organization will be different than other organizations. So our intention is to use these as benchmarks for ourselves rather than necessarily comparing to others, because then we're just going to be playing that game of keeping up with the Joneses instead of really focusing on what's important to our staff members and how can we focus on that moving forward. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I was just more, and thank you for that. I was just more curious as to our starting position. I think I agree with your notion that we benchmark against ourselves. I was just wondering whether we were starting from a comparatively from a good, bad, or horrible position, but it sounds like you've sort of answered that question, so I'm good.
Not a problem. I'll also talk a bit more about how we're comparing ourselves in relation to that more global scale in a couple of slides from now. So maybe that'll provide a little bit more insight there, and then we can go over that again too. So in terms of how we're using this information directly in our EDI strategy, what we've taken is our diversity engagement questions specifically. So things such as, I trust TCHC to be fair to all staff and employees. Looking at what does that mean we need to improve? So in this instance, trust and fairness across the organization, and then creating specific objectives and actions within our EDI strategy, such as improving trust between HR, staff, and management, making sure that our policies and procedures are implemented fairly, and working to understand, eliminate, and prevent barriers. So for each of those 22 questions we asked under diversity engagement, we've come up with, I would say, at least 3, if not 5 specific actions that we need to take based upon the results from there. So initially, what we've really focused on since we got the results of our survey was to refresh some of our policies, including our workplace diversity policy, our hiring policy, and our recruitment standard operating procedure, working with our learning and organizational development team on the leadership development strategy to make sure that our managers have the information and tools they need to lead those cross-cultural interactions, working with our internal committees, and also creating communications about what we learned, what we intend to do, and how we've been moving forward through newsletters, all staff memos, and on our in-house page, which is our intranet. We've captured a lot of information through the survey, and by presenting this information and working on specific actions with our internal groups, we can understand what our prioritizations need to be, what our pain points are, and really taking those actions to meet the needs of our employees and then in their interactions with tenants. We also have some representation numbers and percentages. So in terms of demographic representation overall, we can see that out of the people who participated in the survey, 61% identified as racialized, 2% Indigenous, 42% as cisgender women, 1% under that trans umbrella, 11% identified as a person from the 2S LGBTIAQ+ community, and 14% identified as a person living with a disability. But we also have this information by affiliation. So in this graph, you can see unionized, which is the blue bar, non-unionized, which is the orange bar, and management, including our CSU management, which is the gray bar. But we also have this information by division, which we intend to use as benchmarks moving forward. One of the other pieces of information that we have is also the breakdown of categories. So because we asked people to select all the options that apply to them, we can see what these breakdowns are, how many people have different and multiple identities under each of the different dimensions of diversity. We can highlight and showcase data such as this and others as we create programs, provide training, and any other initiatives that we take as part of the EDI strategy to showcase the why behind what our ideas are as part of our rationale. In terms of the comments that we got as part of the questions, each question allowed people to write an extra response. We had 5 key themes that came out of this. The first was around transparency and accountability and how we discuss different items and objectives, not just with our staff, but also with our tenants. It was valued, respected, and listened to as our second category, which talked about how interactions between staff and their managers occur, especially around change and bringing new ideas forward. The third was representation, especially of those invisible and unique dimensions of diversity. Management preferences or unequal treatment was really around implementing policies and procedures in a way that seemed fair and equitable. And education and awareness was around the different types of training that our staff members believed that not only they needed, but our managers needed in order to have positive interactions amongst themselves and with our tenants. So how are we using this information? As I noted, many of our individual inclusion questions have at least one action item, if not multiple, and we're going to be using that demographic data as benchmarks moving forward. We're also going to be using the analysis from the comment section to understand what we need to do moving forward in terms of training and really developing those department-specific action plans with our ELT members. And all of these actions are tied to how we measure and evaluate our progress, especially as we talk about our maturity model or those benchmarks that I was answering for our chair. So in terms of measuring and evaluating our EDI strategy, one of the methods is by using a maturity model, which we're using the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion benchmarks. Maturity models, for those of you who are unaware, offer a simple but comprehensive snapshot of how mature or far along an organization is in its diversity and inclusion worker journey. We can analyze our progress through advancement of levels of the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion benchmarks, and I'll get into that in just a minute. We also will have action item specific measures to understand the progress and success of individual programs, and these might look different depending on what our objective is with the action item we're taking. And last but not least is progress reports to all of our different stakeholders, including here at the board, on what our progress has been, what we've seen move, and what we intend to do in the future based upon what we've learned by implementing these different actions. In terms of the global diversity, equity, and inclusion benchmarks, on the right-hand side, you can see the triangle that they use to show a visual of the different categories that they have. So there's 15 categories with 275 benchmarks set across what they deem as their 5 levels. Level 1 is inactive, level 3 is best practice. So our intention is to move across those different levels and categories to make sure that we're meeting different benchmarks. And while some of the things that we're doing currently are in that level 1 or level 2 because we're looking at compliance, our intention is to start to move towards that level 3 and level 4, and eventually hopefully start to set some of those best practices moving forward. Which leads us to our EDI strategy goals. So all of the information that we learned in our consultation process has provided us with 4 goals that we hope to achieve throughout the entire EDI strategy. The first is to identify and address systemic barriers within Toronto community housing. The second is to create programs to meet the needs of our equity deserving groups. The third is to engage our diverse communities in meaningful ways. And the fourth is to attract and leverage a diverse workforce. These are the goals that are the basis and working points for us moving forward to ultimately adjust our culture to be more equitable and inclusive, which will lead to greater diversity here at TCHC. But we also have these spread out amongst 3 phases to make sure that we have adequate time, financial, and human resources to get all of these goals accomplished. So phase 1 is our internal strengthening of EDI, where we want to make sure that we're looking at and identifying those visible and invisible barriers, ways to eliminate them and prevent them moving forward, and giving our staff members the tools that they need to feel confident and comfortable in interactions, not just amongst themselves, but also with the tenants. In phase 2, we want to audit and assess goods, programs, services, and information to make sure that our current practices are equitable and inclusive. And phase 3 is to collaborate and build more inclusive practices because we are tenant-based and we want to have that tenant-based lens to make sure that all interactions between staff members and tenants are done in an equitable and inclusive way. But we need to do further consultation to address the needs of our tenants through this lens. But in order to do so, our staff members have to feel confident in being able to lead those interactions. So just a bit about how our phases and goals work together. So if we look at phase 1, which is that internal strengthening of EDI, we have a specific action of embedding inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility into our team meetings and external documents, which while I'm outlining that it's tied to goal 4, is also tied to goal 3 and goal 2. Many of our actions highlight some of those different aspects of the different goals, but we're just putting them into different time frames so that we have the adequate time to be able to actually achieve them. In terms of phase 1, the intention is to create more cultural competence in our leadership and staff to ensure awareness, understanding, and proactively remove barriers. We have 8 areas that we wish to address, and we should see these as more foundational happening during these different phases and then building off of them as we move forward. We have a variety of intended outcomes for these areas, but especially around EDI being embedded into our communications, trust and respect between our staff members, management, and our HR department is improved, and we have education, training, and awareness for all staff. In terms of phase 2, we want to work to audit and assess the way we create, advertise, adjust, and assess the success of our work. And we also have 8 areas here to address, and that will occur over the next few years as well. We have some intended outcomes for these as well, including EDI programs for all of our divisions and departments individually, having hiring strategies that utilize demographic data to ensure representation, and that we've updated our programs and services based upon the data we've collected. And then in phase 3, our collaborate and build, we want to have more economic and social development opportunities to build trust with our tenants, partners, and Indigenous communities. And as I noted, we need to do more consultation leading up to this phase. But based upon the comments and the results from our survey, we know we have at least 4 areas that we wish to address in this. And in terms of our intended outcomes, we want to have tenants who understand how to access information and services and be able to work with community partners to strengthen our community involvement and economic development. In terms of next steps, I know we are coming to the end of June, but our intention is to share the EDI strategy with our staff over the next week or so, while working to continue to implement action items that we deemed a priority from the diversity survey, as well as others that need to happen this year, and work with our internal committees to prioritize other actions. We will be distributing our first progress report at the end of the year to both the GCHRC and the board, but our intention is to have progress and highlights along the way, not just for our staff, but for our other stakeholders as well. And that's all. So I'm open to any questions you may have, but thank you for your attention and for listening to me today.
Thanks, Jamie. Tim has had to step away, so I'm going to be chairing the rest of the meeting in his place. So could I ask if any board members have any questions for Barbara or Jamie? John?
Just in terms of the methodology, we had about, you said we had over 1,000 respondents. How long did the survey, how many questions was the survey? How long did it take to complete?
Through the chair to the director, I would have to double check, but I believe we had about 45 to 50 questions. And I got here in January, so I didn't actually have a chance to complete it, but I would say it probably took anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes to do so.
Do you know how many people started the survey and then said, to heck with it, I'm not completing it?
I don't know offhand. I don't think we captured that in this iteration of the survey, but it is something that we've talked about looking at for next time to see, have we asked too many questions? Do we need to separate the types of questions that we ask to make sure that people can participate in a way that makes them feel comfortable? And some of the feedback that we got from our internal committees was that people might not have felt comfortable to answer some of those later questions based on the demographic questions that we asked, so they might have closed out throughout. So those are things that are learning curves as we run the survey for the first time that our intention is to learn from and do differently as we move forward.
I mean, my comment is, I mean, I think that the results are generally favorable, and but you might have had a preponderance of people respond who felt strongly about the topic, and people who didn't feel strongly about the topic, who might have also responded favorably, just didn't bother. So in a sense, it's hard to get an accurate measure of the full pulse of the organization. 50%, if you were taking it of the general population, is really great. In a corporate setting, it would be nice if it was sort of 75 to 80%, and I think that would be a great goal to try to aim for. And then you've really got a sense as to how people feel about the organization and their place in the organization. That's all I have.
Are there any other questions, Mohammed?
Thank you for this strategy you have taken. My question actually, this EDI is only for the employees of the TCHC or the tenant?
So through the chair to the director, it's a combination. As I noted, our first two phases are focused really heavily internally on our staff members while we get ready to do more consultation with our tenants to make sure that we're addressing their needs. In combination with doing further consultation with our tenants, we also have our tenant experience survey, which we're learning from as well, to understand what needs to be done to better meet the needs of everyone. But the hard part and some of the reasons that we didn't do that in this first place is based upon the comments we received in the survey. Our staff members didn't feel as though they had the knowledge themselves to even interact amongst one another. And that means that they don't have the knowledge or confidence to interact with tenants. So by strengthening what we can do internally for our staff members to interact with each other, and then start to build out that confidence in interacting with our tenants, we can then really meet the needs of what the different dimensions of diversity need with our tenants.
So if any tenants, they feel they're like a diversity or equality or any kinds of issue about the human rights, so they will go to the TCHC and they say my rights has been violated, so you will handle that one also, right?
Perhaps I can jump in on this. Thank you for the question, Director. We do have mechanisms in place right now in the organization for tenants to bring forward such concerns. So while when we talk about our strategy and we talk about a heavier focus with tenants more down the road as we build our internal knowledge and capacity first, there's no question that right now there are already in place avenues for tenants to bring forward any such concerns related to human rights or any type of inequity that they may be concerned with.
Yes, thank you. Because one of the deputation tenant, she raised the issue that she want the tenant concern will be heard by the TCHC properly, and they will respect every person, equality, diversity, right? So we don't want any discrimination between, yeah. So we respect each other, values and diversity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Comments?
Fidel, it's Fidel, it's Debbie.
Okay, go ahead, Debbie.
Thank you for the presentation, Jamie. I'm wondering though if it would be, well, for me, it would be helpful if in the next iteration of presentation to committee or to the board that we got a sense of which demographics were having which kinds of issues. So issues of belonging, right? It's how are people living with disabilities feeling about the belonging, and is that different from those without disabilities? Is it the same for folks who are racialized? I've noticed that you broke down racial categories. Well, you broke down the South Asian, the Asian categories. Are there differences amongst racialized groups within the staff team in terms of how they believe they are treated or how they are experiencing the workplace? And are you taking that into account as you're setting priorities, either within teams or across the whole organization? Because on the face of it, it looks very favorable, but I wonder if that is true for various categories of people.
Through the chair to the director, yes, I definitely cut down the survey results portion so that we could talk about the EDI strategy as well. But we do have that information. We can see through those different demographic categories how people are feeling and compare it to how are those demographic categories feeling within each division so that we can really start to address those very individual and specific needs, because we do see differences, right? We see a difference in who's more favorable and who's less favorable within different demographic categories. And we're using that in how we pilot different programs, the types of training that we're really prioritizing this year, and how we intend to build out our different programs and who we need to consult with further as we really start to make sure that we're addressing everybody's needs. So yes, I'm more than happy to sit here and talk for 45 minutes on the results just of the survey, but I wanted to make sure that we covered at least the basics and then talk about what those are as we start to build those programs as well.
And just to get it on the record, I'm assuming also then you're able to cut the data so that when we look at positions within the organization based on race or disability or gender for that matter, or LGBTI identity, you're able to see within a department leadership versus in terms of which racialized categories are in leadership, which are not, those kinds of things as well.
For the record, yes, we can.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Francis?
Yes, I just have one question. As far as further consultation will be done with tenants to address their needs. So how would that consultation be done?
Through the chair to the director, we aren't sure yet. We want to see how we have been working with our tenants currently to do those consultation, what's worked well, what hasn't, see if it's something that we want to do internally or have a consultant to do. And these are parts of the conversations that we're going to have with our staff members, especially the ones who work with our tenants on a day-to-day basis. What has worked well for them in talking about some of these issues? Where have they found some of those pain points, and how can we start to address them in those consultation process, especially learning from what the center and the CABR team did while building out their strategy, and also what type of responses do we have to that tenant engagement survey. So our intention is to use multiple methods, but what those methods look like, I don't have an answer at this current moment.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, could I have a motion to receive this report? Francis, Debbie seconder, thank you very much. All in favor? Thank you, Jamie, and good luck. It's important. Important work. Thank you. We will move on to item 9B. And this, I I actually pulled this item. I had a quick question, so I don't know if other directors do, but my question just related to it's on page 167, and it was number 187, and it just talked about the city, the 160 million funding being revisited. And I just wondered if someone could provide some more context for that to see what the impact would be on TCHC. I'm not sure actually who can answer that question.
I'm wondering if, through the chair, I'm just wondering if Roseanne is on the call.
I actually don't see her, but I'm not sure if I see everyone.
I am
oh,
on the
okay.
call.
Yes.
Actually, I'm not sure. I didn't realize they were going to revisit the funding.
That kind of jumped out at me.
They've committed to
Maybe I can
160
suggest.
they've committed to the 160 for the 10 years, and perhaps they're revisiting to increase the amount, hopefully.
Well, I was hopeful, but that's why I was asking if it was a chance that it could be a negative or a positive impact for TCHC.
If there's any impact, I would think it would be a positive impact and not a negative one, only because the 160 has been committed as part of the National Housing Strategy Co-Investment Fund. So if they're revisiting, it could possibly to increase it for net zero impact on the capital plan.
If there's any way to get a little bit more information, I'm not sure when they're going to be revisiting it, but I think it'd be great if you could bring that back to the board.
Yeah, that would be, because I read it to as a negative, that it would depend on federal and provincial dollars flowing for us to be able to keep its commitment of 160, was how I read it.
That was my concern, Debbie.
Yeah.
So, but I'm glad Roseanne sees it as a positive.
Good.
Hopeful.
We'll be quoting you, Roseanne.
Yeah.
It'd be good to get some more information from the city, though, some clarification on this.
If you could, I'd appreciate it. So if there are any other questions on this item? Okay, hearing none, could I have a motion to receive the City Council direction report? Brian, thank you. Mohammed, seconder. All in favor? Perfect. Motion passed. And then I think the next item is item 10A. And Dare, I think we have a deputant.
We do. Ms. Wilkinson has asked to depute in relation to that matter. Ms. Wilkinson, are you with us? Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I wanted to comment on this response from Toronto Community Housing with regard to the Oates biannual update. This response to the board is actually in reference to the February 25th report that Oates submitted to the board, and I'm not sure why it wasn't attached, because it contained important information and statistics which support its findings. So we're looking at this report rather blindly. But I must say, this is a well-written report. It looks good on paper. It certainly has all the right language that a board would be looking for. But to what end? I don't see deliverables. I don't see commitment to reduce arrears, by how much and when. You know, what are the consequences for staff with non-compliance with Toronto Community Housing policies, and for management once Oates identifies such non-compliance? It is unclear how Toronto Community Housing is going to be measuring the improvements when they report back to the board. I don't see any key performance indicators. Administrative delays and efficient use of resources. The arrears collections process requires tenant files in arrears to be forwarded to Oates within the first month of arrears. Yet it took 17 months to refer files to Oates. While average arrears were about 2,600, they increased to about 4,700 before being referred to Oates. This is indefensible. Some of the councillors may recall the $64,000 tenant in arrears. Toronto Community Housing was front page news. Number 2, non-compliance with policies and procedures. The most important piece to the arrears collection process is to identify arrears early. Adhere to the arrears collection process timelines and connect in person with the tenant. And 8 years later, the Commissioner continues to identify these same 3 systemic issues. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different outcome. This is a great disservice to tenants by allowing their arrears to escalate. You know, the unreliable internal information for a variety of reasons, but maybe to help the tenant service coordinators, they could have, you know, refresher training. You know, but something is definitely missing. Why is it that 6 early resolution officers at OACH can resolve hundreds of tenant arrears files in 45 days, and 130 some odd Toronto Community Housing staff cannot do this in 17 months? Following the arrears pre-eviction audit, the Commissioner identified 12 vulnerable households that would have been wrongfully evicted, and that's on us. As a result, the Ombudsman, the CEO, and the COO recommended expanding the mandate of OACH to review all tenant arrears files prior to proceeding to the Landlord and Tenant Board. And the Board approved this change in mandate effective January 1 of this year. This is a significant increase in workload, and OACH must be properly resourced or risk burning out or losing their existing staff. There may be a need for increased skill sets and training through OACH to teach the tenant service coordinators, there's so many acronyms, the OACH approach, adhering to the arrears collection process, and how to better identify when a tenant may be vulnerable. This will reduce reputational risk for Toronto Community Housing in wrongfully evicting those vulnerable tenants. Now, the quality of service. We are a social housing landlord with some of the most marginalized residents in the city of Toronto. It is unconscionable that some tenant service coordinators are still unable to identify a vulnerable tenant. And creating service hubs does not fix this problem. Toronto Community Housing has pretty much exhausted all avenues to address the backlog of arrears with limited success. So it's time to think outside the box, and to that end, I have 2 suggestions. Creation of an arrears task force whose mandate is to reduce arrears. It would need to be appropriately staffed with training provided by OACH and overseen by the Commissioner to ensure that those arrears collection process timelines are adhered to and the OACH approach is embedded. Set a target for arrears reduction, evaluate success of the program and lessons learned. The second option, rather than have OACH follow up on all tenant files facing eviction, bring this expertise in-house. Have the tenant service coordinators report to the Commissioner. This will ensure they receive the exact same training as the early resolution officers and enable them to better understand and manage these complex files. The end result should be that your staff are appropriately trained and able to manage complex arrears files independently, identify vulnerable tenants, increase confidence in their skill sets, and eliminate the need to be audited in perpetuity. With current arrears sitting at $25 million, this does not bode well for our tenants, the shareholder, or the corporation's reputation. So what is the arrears breaking point for change? Is it $50 million? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Are there any comments or questions for the deputant from any board members? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much for your time and your input. I think those are all the items that were pulled. I think.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yes. Can I just take a minute? I actually wanted to thank Councillor Valayo for her dedication and commitment to this board, to our tenants, and to the City of Toronto in pursuit of creating more affordable housing. Thank you very much for your services.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we'll move to other business. I think John identified an issue as it relates to the status of bachelor unit rentals.
Sorry, can we just wanted to check, were there any questions of staff and board members on item 10A? And if not, can we have a motion to receive?
Oh, sorry, I forgot the motion. I did ask if they had questions, but I forgot the motion. Sorry. Marcel? move. Mohammed, seconder. Thank you. All in favor receiving this report? Thank you. Sorry, Dara.
I'm good.
So now we'll move to other business. I can't see John.
Mr. Campbell had indicated that he needed to leave the meeting for an hour at 11. So I think he's currently absent from the meeting. And perhaps what I can suggest is that we can reach out to the director and get a better sense of what the issue that he wanted to flag for us is. Given that he is the chair of the Tenant Services Committee, it may be that this is an item that we can add to the agenda of a future meeting and then report up to the board through that process.
Okay, that sounds good to me. So if there's no other business, hearing none, could I have a motion to adjourn public meeting? Marcel, Mohammed, seconder. Thank you. All in favor? Meeting adjourned.
Thanks,
Have
everyone.
a nice
Thank you all.
day.
Have a great rest of the day.
Okay. Enjoy Canada Day.